Health and safety. Legislative requirements in the farming industry and overview. Prior to June 30th, 2006, all farming operations were exempt from the application of the Act. Since June 30th, 2006, the Act applies, with some limitations and exceptions, to all farming operations that have paid workers. The purpose of the Act is to protect workers against health and safety hazards on the job. The main features of the Act, as they apply to farming operations, are described below. Regulations. Under the regulations that apply to farming operations, employers, supervisors, and workers are all obligated to comply with these regulations, in addition to their responsibilities under the Act. Regulations made under the Occupational Health and Safety Act that apply to farming operations, Ontario Regulation 414/05, Farming Operations. Application of Act to farming operations. Subject to the limitations and conditions set out in this regulation, the Act applies to farming operations. Exception. Despite Section 1, the Act does not apply to a farming operation operated by a self-employed person without any workers. Limitations. Joint Health and Safety Committees. Despite Section 1, subsection 9 of the Act applies only to farming operations where 20 or more workers are regularly employed and have duties that include performing work related to one or more of the operations specified in subsection 2. The following are the operations referred to in subsection 1: mushroom farming, greenhouse farming, dairy farming, hog farming, cattle farming, poultry farming. Despite Section 1, where a joint health and safety committee is required at a farming operation, the requirement for certified members set out in subsection 9 of the Act applies to that farming operation only if 50 or more workers are regularly employed at it. The following regulations apply to farming operations. 1. Regulation 834 of the Revised Regulations of Ontario, 1990, Critical Injury, defined, made under the Act. 2. Ontario Regulation 780/94, Training Programs, made under the Act. 3. Ontario Regulation 572/99, Training Requirements for certain skill sets and trades, made under the Act. A husband and wife are self-employed farmers with no paid workers. They have incorporated their business for tax purposes. They each draw salaries from their company and receive T4 slips. Are they workers of the company for the purpose of the Occupational Health and Safety Act? Is such an operation covered by the Act? No. The Ministry of Labour would consider the husband and wife to be self-employed, and the Occupational Health and Safety Act would not apply to this farming operation solely because it is incorporated and the owners collect a salary. Enforcement. If the internal responsibility system fails to address adequately the health and safety issues on a farming operation, or if the Act and regulations are not being followed, the Ministry of Labour has the authority to enforce the law. Inspectors have broad powers to, among other things, inspect any workplace, investigate any potentially hazardous situation and work refusal, order compliance with the Act and regulations, and initiate prosecutions. Employers, supervisors, and workers must assist and cooperate with inspectors. Always ask the MOL inspector for their identification. They will have with them a warrant card, picture ID, and a badge that give them full authority to inspect your workplace and all documentation in order to ensure you are abiding by the law. A worker health and safety representative is required on all farming operations with 6 to 19 regularly employed workers, regardless of the type of farm or commodity, and a farming operation that has 20 or more regular employed workers that are not required to have a joint health and safety committee. This regulation is in accordance with Section 8(1) of the Act. Regularly employed means anyone who is employed for a period that exceeds 3 months. This includes permanent full-time staff, permanent part-time staff, contract staff, and seasonal workers. It also includes managers and supervisors. Determining if a worker health and safety representative or joint health and safety committee is required in the workplace. There may be situations where there is a high turnover of staff and a number of different workers fill a particular position. With each person working in it for less than 3 months, if the term of the position exceeds 3 months, the position will be included for the purpose of determining whether a health and safety representative or a joint health and safety committee is required, even though no single worker occupied that position for more than 3 months. When is a joint health and safety committee required on a farming operation? A joint health and safety committee is required if there are 20 or more workers who are regularly employed and have duties related to one or more of the following operations: mushroom farming, greenhouse farming, dairy farming, hog farming, cattle farming, poultry farming. Section 9.2 of the Act and Sections 3.1 and 3.2 of Ontario Regulations 414/05. Who is responsible for establishing a committee on a farming operation? Every employer with 20 or more workers whose workplace falls into one of the above commodities is responsible for establishing a joint health and safety committee. This means causing the members to be chosen and setting aside a time and place for meetings. Module 9. The Occupational Health and Safety Act is administered and enforced by the Ministry of Labor. Inspectors of the Ministry of Labor investigate complaints, accidents, and work refusals. They inspect workplaces to ensure that the Act is being complied with and that the internal responsibility system is working. Ideally, because of the internal responsibility system provided for in the Act, employers and workers will be able to resolve health and safety issues that arise at the workplace themselves without the need to call in an inspector. A representative of the employer and the representative of the workers normally accompany an inspector during an inspection or investigation. Any information obtained by an inspector or by anyone accompanying the inspector is confidential and it cannot be disclosed to anyone unless it is necessary to do so under the Act or some other law, Section 63(1). Where an inspector visits a farming operation in response to a complaint, the identity of the worker who filed the complaint is kept confidential. The Ministry of Labor recognizes that inspectors entering farming operations need to be aware of certain circumstances and hazards unique to such operations, such as the need to take precautions so that there is no biological cross-contamination between farms. Inspectors are trained on these issues prior to going into farming operations. Further, inspectors are governed by the Ministry of Labor's Code of Professionalism. Under this code, which provides a consistent set of expectations regarding professionalism and service standards, inspectors conduct themselves in a fashion that promotes respect for the law, instills public confidence in their fairness and impartiality, conveys a professional image, reflects the high standards, character, and demeanor expected of those entrusted with the compliance function, and ensures that the duties being performed are timely, consistent, impartial, and courteous. The Health and Safety Policy. How to prepare an occupational health and safety policy on a farming operation. The Occupational Health and Safety Act requires employers that regularly employ more than 5 employees to prepare and review at least annually a written occupational health and safety policy, and to develop and maintain a program to implement this policy. This appendix has been prepared to assist employers in understanding these obligations. Occupational Health and Safety Policies. An occupational health and safety policy is a statement of an employer's commitment to worker health and safety. A clear, concise occupational health and safety policy, signed by the highest level of management at the workplace, should state the employer's commitment, support, and attitude to health and safety program for the protection of workers. The employer's attitudes, relationships between management and workers, community interest, and technology all combine to play a part in determining how health and safety are viewed and addressed in the workplace. Workplaces with exceptional health and safety records have established a clear line of responsibility for correcting health and safety concerns. This action enhances worker relations between management and workers. An example of a good health and safety policy follows. Health and Safety Policy. Employer name is vitally interested in the health and safety of its employees. protection of employees from injury or occupational disease is a major continuing objective. Blank will make every effort to provide a safe, healthy work environment. All supervisors and workers must be dedicated to the continuing objective of reducing risk of injury. Blank as an employer is ultimately responsible for worker health and safety. As the employer of blank, I give my personal promise that every reasonable precaution will be taken for the protection of workers. Supervisors will be held accountable for the health and safety of workers under their supervision. Supervisors are responsible to ensure that machinery and equipment are safe and that workers work in compliance with established safe work practices and procedures. Workers must receive adequate training in their specific work tasks to protect their health and safety. Every worker must protect his or her own health and safety by working in compliance with the law and with safe work practices and procedures established by the company. All workplace parties shall consider health and safety in every activity. Commitment to health and safety is an integral part of this organization. From the owner to the workers. Signed, Employer. Health and Safety Program. In addition to preparing a health and safety policy like the one above, the employer who regularly employs more than 5 employees must have also a program in place to implement this policy. This program will vary, depending upon the hazards encountered in a particular workplace. Program elements may include all or some of the following. Worker training, example, new employees, new equipment, new job procedures, workplace inspections and hazard analysis, analysis of the accidents and illnesses occurring at the workplace, a health and safety budget, a formal means of communication to address promptly the concerns of workers, confined space entry procedure, for example, into spreader tanks, manure storage areas, silos, lockout procedure, example, to ensure that energy and equipment is prevented from causing movement to the equipment while workers are performing maintenance or making other adjustments to it. Machine guarding, material handling practices and procedures, procedures specific to the individual farming operation, example, harvesting fruit, large animal handling, preventing occupational disease, example, preventing the transmission of diseases from animals to humans, maintenance and repairs, housekeeping, personal protective equipment, example, respirators, hearing protection, fall protection, emergency procedures, first aid and rescue procedures, electrical safety, fire prevention, engineering controls, example, ventilation. This is not a comprehensive list. Note, the program identifies the roles and responsibilities of individuals who are in charge of its implementation. It is a tool that makes it possible for the internal responsibility system to be in place. It embodies clear links between the health and safety policy statements and their day-to-day implementation in the workplace.